Welcome to the Beau Show, the home of faith, family, and freedom. When Congress added the Bill of Rights to the Constitution in 1791, they had to think of protected rights that were not already in the Constitution. This included 10 key amendments that were necessary to protect the rights of all Americans. They included religious freedom, the right to free speech, assembly, and the press, the right to bear arms, unreasonable search and seizure, due process, double jeopardy, a speedy public trial, a trial by jury, cruel and unusual punishment, and the delegation of powers not in the Constitution reserved to the states themselves. James Madison wrote all 10 of these, and they were designed to place restraints upon the potential of too much government power. The new states were concerned about the government having an excessive amount of power akin to their previous king. So they wanted states' rights, and especially individual rights, to be protected. See, the Federalists thought that the Constitution was sufficient, and it should go without saying that if it's not spelled out, the rights belong with states and individuals. But the Anti-Federalists said, wait a minute, we're not so sure. We might need this codified and added so that you are kept to your word. Eventually, 27 amendments were ratified, especially some very, very important amendments regarding the abolition of slavery and voting rights. But back in the 1700s, as visionary as the founders were, they could not have foreseen the digital world in which we live, which spreads information at unimaginable speeds. While the First Amendment was clearly thought of first to protect our speech and assembly and expression, the digital age has made it possible to infringe on some of these rights. The founders thought the right to freely speak as a natural law. So any disruption to that protection would be an intrusion of natural order. And if you fast forward to 2016 to 2020 and now 2023, there's clearly a disruption to the natural order. In fact, artificial intelligence is taking the place of and will become preferential to actual intelligence. The print newspaper is now a digital newspaper. Hear ye is now, this post has been flagged for potential misinformation. In the 1700s, it was George Washington who created a spy ring inside the British Army to find out their plans. Now we have Chinese spy balloons flying around and fang fang. So how do you combat this? How do you protect the rights of the citizen pursuant to the First Amendment? Well, you have to create something, or else some technocracy is going to trample all over you. And what the founders certainly never intended, but might not have foreseen, was a way for the government to work in tandem with major private corporations to censor a citizen's right to speak, and even a right to practice his or her religion. And so when Congress fails to react to citizens' rights being infringed upon, well, the states have to step up. Even though free speech is a federal constitutional right, it is being trampled upon. But the Constitution says that any right not enumerated in its text is reserved to the states respectively. If children cannot be protected on the internet because the platform host won't do it, then someone has to step in to protect those kids. So, like many other decisive actions that he has taken, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has stepped up to the plate. On February 15th from Palm Beach, Florida, he stepped up to the podium to introduce a digital Bill of Rights. Here's DeSantis announcing the Digital Bill of Rights and explaining the chronology and reasons for doing so.
A couple years ago, we were the first state to take the lead to protect Floridians against big tech censorship. And we passed legislation which did a couple of things, and we knew going into this that this was an issue of first impression. We knew there would be litigation. We knew it would eventually end up to have to be decided by the U.S. Supreme Court. But we provided some provisions of law that said these tech platforms, the social media companies, they are not, by their own admission, publishers. which a publisher, if you started a website, you could publish whatever you want, and if I wanted to put my views, you're under no obligation to publish my perspective or anybody's perspective. You can make those decisions. But they are not publishers, because if they were publishers, they wouldn't get Section 230 liability from lawsuits. And so they hide under the Section 230 from lawsuits, saying they're not publishers, saying they're open forums, and yet, as we knew in 2021 this was the case, but now with what's come out, we know without a shadow of a doubt, they are not functioning truly as open platforms. They do have terms and conditions, they have certain rules, but those rules are applied with a thumb on the scale against the people they disagree with politically. So you've seen people who have conservative views marginalized entirely, banned, deplatformed, shadow banned, all these different things have happened. And so what we try to do is just say, look, in the state of Florida, we have consumer protection, unfair trade practice laws. If you're advertising as being an open platform, you're taking that liability that says you're not a publisher, you're monetizing by taking people's data who join your services, and then if you turn around and you deplatform someone based on viewpoint, you're committing a fraud on the consumer. And so we wanted the Floridians who've been affected to be able to bring consumer fraud actions against big tech. We also empowered the Attorney General of Florida to be able to police big tech if they were doing this. And then we also had protections for political candidates so they couldn't deplatform a candidate, because honestly, you get lead up to the election. I think that's something that's a live possibility.
This is an important distinction between publishers and open forums. They are not functioning as open platforms. They have gotten directly involved in censorship and moderation, rather than mere platforms for free speech. Florida has consumer protection and unfair trade practice law already. So when a Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, pre-Elon Musk of course, would deplatform someone based upon viewpoint, they were committing a consumer fraud. The point about political candidates is also quite poignant, because if a candidate cannot speak to his or her potential constituents and voters, you have removed that candidate's free speech. Social media companies make a lot of money out of taking consumer data to advertise to us. So if you call yourself an open platform, fine, have your terms of service, but if you don't apply those rules in an equal way, or you apply them in a discriminatory way, you are in effect committing fraud, which is why DeSantis has this going all the way up to the court system and may even be heard by the Supreme Court itself. He uses a case in point in which in 2021, DeSantis held a roundtable discussion with medical professionals all the way from Stanford to Oxford about the inefficacy of masks, especially in kids at school. The video of that roundtable got removed by Google and YouTube. And it wasn't just about masks, but it was also about keeping schools open. And that's part of a national debate. Rather than permitting that debate digitally, Google and YouTube censored it, even when the merits of the debate have proven correct. DeSantis also remarked on what we now call the Twitter blacklist, which were users, largely conservative, who dissented from the uniform Anthony Fauci narrative. DeSantis also pointed to the need for a digital Bill of Rights due to the foreign influence of China. Listen here.
You also have the role of China in tech with things like TikTok. And this is something there, if you look at the TikTok that they use in China, it's much different than what they're trying to do in the United States. With China, it's all very wholesome, patriotic. In the United States, they're trying to inject as much garbage into this as possible. They're getting the data from people, creates a huge security risk through our country. And so this is something that a lot of people have said, wait a minute, is an issue. So we were able to, last summer, I did an executive order covering not just TikTok, but a bunch of stuff for the state government. And so we don't have state government using TikTok anymore. We never really had a lot. There's a couple here or there, like a year or so ago. So that's there. Today, our Department of Management Services is clarifying that executive order not only applies to TikTok, it applies to all of the digital platforms based with the CCP. And so it's not just TikTok. There's these other Chinese platforms that we will now have nothing in the state government. And again, I don't know how much is being used or not used on those others. I don't think it's a lot, but it's important to clarify that so people know where we stand. But I think this is a huge issue, and it's one thing to say you're not going to have the state government do it, but we're such a small footprint. I mean, this is only like a little, like throwing a pebble in a lake, so you got to do more. So we are going to be doing more with our proposals here today.
DeSantis is one of the few governors who recognizes the perils of dealing with invasive Chinese technology and what that means for privacy and data. In addition, he brought up the fact that when you buy a new cell phone, even with minimal or no use, you don't open an app or anything, it will start tracking your every move and learn your habits. If you mention red roses on a phone call, soon you will start seeing ads about red roses. I think we've all seen that happen. And let's face it, it's weird. I mean, it means that apps are listening to what we are saying, and we didn't sign up for that intrusion. Another area that DeSantis sees as a problem is the way that search engines, especially Google, manipulate results. Companies can pay to have their ads go up higher in the search results. But more nefariously, a result could be skewed with bias to influence a perspective. It may point you to a media source that could also be biased and uncredible. I think of the Jussie Smollett story as a great example of that. So what is this digital Bill of Rights? Let's hear again from the governor.
And so, what is the Digital Bill of Rights? Well, we want to protect your right as a Floridian to have private in-person conversations without big tech surveilling you. If you want to consent to let them have this information so they can fashion advertising based off of it, it's your right to consent to do so, but it should only be if you consent and they don't have a right to have that information as a matter of first principle. We also are going to protect the right to participate in online platforms without unfair censorship. We want free speech. We want more speech, not less speech. We want to protect the right to know how these internet search engines are manipulating search results. Transparency in terms of what we're doing so that you can evaluate whether that's a search engine that you want to use or maybe you want to take your business elsewhere. We want to protect your right to control all your personal data on the largest and most common platforms. They take that personal data and they make a fortune off your personal data. So you're talking about Google, Facebook, just a handful of these companies. They should really get express authorization from you before they're able to monetize that or use it in any way. And then finally, Digital Bill of Rights aims to protect children from various online harms. And as we see, that's a huge issue of what we're seeing.
Here is a one sheet that outlines the basic bullet points of the proposed legislation. So this proposal would enshrine the following: the right to have private, in-person conversations without big tech surveillance, the right to participate in online platforms without unfair censorship, the right to know how internet search engines manipulate search results, the right to control personal data, and the right to protect children from online harms. So let's break each of these rights down. Freedom from surveillance. The proposal won't allow private surveillance of conversations on cell phones. Now, the government can't do that in theory, but the actual phone companies could potentially be doing it. The other element of this is the collection of real-time information, such as GPS location, biometric data, and personally identifiable information, and then preventing state or local governments from using these apps from foreign hostile nations, such as China. And here's an important addition.
We're also going to say you're not going to be able to access things like TikTok using networks in any government building, including schools and universities. And so
keep watching at epochtv.com/The Beau Show.